يعطيك العافية. Thank you very much, أخوي محمد. And now I'll leave the floor لأخوي عبد الوهاب من أجل قمة الطيران العربي وحلقة نقاش حتكون بمشيئة الله مع الرؤساء التنفيذيين.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. تتضمن فعاليات الجمعية العامة كل عام جلسة خاصة تسمى قمة الطيران العربي. تتضمن حلقة نقاش للرؤساء التنفيذيين تشارك مجموعة بارزة من المتحدثين في هذه الجلسة. سيقوم السيد ريتشارد كويست بإدارة هذه الحلقة. I will switch to English now. Richard Quest is CNN's foremost international business correspondent and presenter of Quest Means Business. Quest is the established airline and aviation correspondent at CNN. Richard's dynamic and distinctive style has made him a unique figure in the field of business broadcasting. He has interviewed many airlines executives and has covered a number of breaking aviation stories, and I may add a great friend as well. So Richard, please, the floor is yours. And I would like to invite the gentlemen who are members of the panel, Mr. Abdelhamid Addu, the chairman of Royal Air Maroc, Engineer Samer Majali, the vice chairman of Royal Jordanian, and Mr. Tony Douglas, the CEO of Riyadh Air, and Mr. Adel Rida, the chief operating officer of Emirates Airlines. So let's give a hand to the moderator and the gentlemen of the panel.
That should work, shouldn't it? Yes. Right, gentlemen, thank you. I'm grateful for you all. There are also, we will be taking various questions at different moments throughout, where you'll be able to use that keypad. Locate the keypad on your table, and I'll be asking various questions as we wend our merry way through. This is an unusual panel. I don't recall a panel with a CEO that actually hasn't got any planes and isn't flying anywhere. Now, I think, Tony, this actually either puts you on a disadvantage or a massive advantage, because you can tell everybody else what they're doing wrong in the industry without having anybody to say, well, what you're doing. Which is it? Which is it?
Dream, of course, of doing that, because we're talking here about three incredible airlines, and humbly we've got a lot to learn from all of them. But in our situation, I almost look at the audience. Many people have travelled from within the region and probably know yet again through first-hand experience that Riyadh isn't necessarily the easiest way to connect into. And as you know, we're talking about a G20 country with the fastest growing economy in the world, Richard, and it demands better connectivity. Demands better connectivity.
We'll get to you. I want to start with current events, if I may. This region is on the edge, and the risks, I mean, in the last 24 hours, you've just had leader after leader warning of what can happen. So I'm starting with you at Royal Jordanian, because you are the carrier at the moment that seems to, that stands to be, even though everybody will and is affected, but at the moment you are the one that's right in the middle.
Thanks to my dear friend. you know, this is our fate, actually, to be operating in a region which is beset by regional issues. I remember the first two Iraq wars that happened. Again, we were subjected to a very difficult situation, followed by the Arab Spring, followed by the issues in the north, in Syria, with the Islamic, with the Daesh and all these groups, followed by COVID, the Ukraine crisis, and now this latest event in the region itself. Built up a lot of experience actually dealing with these issues. But we are the closest country now to this recent event, and we are quite negatively affected by all that's going on. We are obviously, our hearts and thoughts go out to all of the casualties in the region, and we sincerely hope that things would quieten down soon. Not only this particular event, but also the history behind this event. And I think it's not only this event happening, it is the issue of this event repeatedly happening every period of time. And this is what I think everybody is looking for in the region, to a solution that will finally quieten down the region, allow economic development, allow people to live at peace and to develop.
What are the practical issues for you at the moment?
Well, I mean, obviously flying westbound is difficult. It's difficult at the moment, even though the space is clear. But we can't fly due to security considerations. North is also an issue. So for Jordan, you know, we are actually quite hemmed in, and most of our flights have to go south down into the Red Sea area, across Sinai, and go north via Egypt into Europe and the rest. And that's quite a big dogleg, costing us much more in terms of, obviously, fuel,
right,
costing us much more. Fuel prices have gone up because of the crisis. And we've seen a major drop in tourism. Jordan relies very heavily on tourism, and we have seen major reservations drop.
And let's, Adol, as a carrier, thank you, as a carrier, the largest, one of the largest, with your transfer traffic and your point-to-point, are you seeing bookings soften, collapse? What are you actually seeing, what people are saying and doing? Just move your microphone there, and if you just switch on.
I think looking at our operation, operating to more than 134 destinations, we have seen some pockets of market slightly been impacted, mainly from Far East, but the majority of the network is really holding up quite well.
So you're not seeing it yet, arguably, say, for example, I'm just arguing from, say, for example, the US, which of course is...
No, not at all. I think we're operating an average about above 80% seat factor across our network, which is quite a good seat factor to operate within this environment. So,
with the risk being on the downside.
I mean, the risk is there, and we have, while we don't wish for any conflict, we are used to be able to adopt our operation and mitigate every risk that we're facing by specific measures to protect our operation and the safety of our passenger and crew.
For Murad, you come out of and our sympathies from the appalling earthquake and the effects of it, and now you go into this, just as you're putting in place a new strategy.
Well, first and foremost, I would like to say all my thoughts and prayers to all the victims, and as you know, this is a difficult period that we all live in, either the victims of the earthquake or the victims in the current war. We have suffered a lot during the earthquake, if that is your question, but we found out that globally travelers come back easier after a global disaster and a natural disaster than after a war or terrorism. It took a couple of weeks before we get back to normal, which is not the case now with what is happening in
This is going to take longer.
It's going to take longer. First and foremost, we have nearly 1 million Jewish Moroccans living in Israel. 1 million. We had to stop the operations between the two countries. Like for Emirates, the connection flights from the US, we have seen a drop for all the connecting flights to the region. But as Samer said, at one point of time it has to stop, because our business is to connect people and bring people together. So anytime there's such a crisis, we cannot do our work properly.
I'm not spend too long on it, but Tony, is this an example, a good example, or a bad situation, but a good example of how this industry, it doesn't matter whether it's a volcano in Iceland, or a war in the Middle East, or terrorist activity in wherever it might be, say for example, with the Ryanair flight, or this industry gets clobbered.
I think probably experience has taught all of us on this panel and everybody in the audience that that's the case.
How do you handle it? How do you put in place structures that can handle it? And the reason I ask you that is you're starting ab initio, and therefore you're putting those structures in place.
Yeah, and look, I think as I've said in the past, the only constant in our line of business is ambiguity. And I think the trick to ambiguity is to embrace it, because you can't predict a lot of the things that are going to happen. You know, in the decades that I've been involved and the guys have been involved and everybody here, we've seen, you know, geopolitical, we've seen economic, we've seen fuel crises, we've seen pandemics, etc., etc., etc. That will continue. What it will be, nobody's crystal ball is well enough calibrated to be able to get it into a risk register, other than to acknowledge the fact that it is more likely to be there than not. So I think the agility that what we stand for, what aviation stands for, is a necessary leadership trait, as opposed to grasping an artificial handrail that presumes that everything going forward will be a constant, because it almost certainly won't be. And we're a startup, as you said before, with a glint in your eye and a cheeky tone, sir. We operate no aircraft yet, but very soon we will do. We'll be announcing a new livery at the Dubai Air Show to complement the one we've already got, and hopefully there'll be a narrow body order soon. But we go into this knowing that this is an environment that is endlessly challenging, and whilst we have the benefit of no legacy, that doesn't make it any easier.
No, because it's the same problems that you all face. And let's move to that. Okay, yeah, go on. You wanted to join in?
Yeah, of course. As Tony said, this business is as you can see, quite difficult. A lot of the costs in this industry are inescapable, and they're long-term. Aircraft orders, you have to order airplanes 10 years in advance now, with deliveries not less than 2 to 3 years down the line. So you have to make these investment choices way up front, and you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So, you know, whether it's in terms of traffic, fuel prices, political instability, and so on. So this is very unique in this industry, that your cost structures are fairly well determined and have to be pre-done in advance. Whereas the daily business of getting revenue and selling passengers is actually on a daily basis changes. And you have to plan, you know, for all this capacity increase, and suddenly, you know, there is no capacity requirement, or there's a change in the capacity requirement.
Or you end up with a well-funded rival up the road that is about to, don't worry, I'm coming to you next on this.
That's very naughty, Richard.
That's what I'm paid for.
Look, you know, you have to deal with anomalies in this existence in terms of, you know, your competition and right. the particular situation they're in versus what you have, and so on. I mean, you know, these are the things that you have to deal with in life, and they're a given. Whether you complain about it or not, these are givens, right. And you have to deal with it.
So let's move to, we'll come back to you, don't worry. Let's move to sustainability. let's take the answer of the panel first, and then we'll do to yourself. Don't vote yet, but let's prepare the question. Do you really believe that airlines will be able to deliver net zero emissions by 2050? Now, your choice of answers are yes, no, at a terrible cost, I won't be here anyway. So, Adil, bearing in mind that, I mean, in an interview with me at IATA in June, Akbar said, who we will all miss, Akbar said, no. He basically called the elephant in the living room and said there's a big pile of poo on the floor, and no, we won't be able to do it. What's your answer?
I think if I say no, I'm going to break to all the oil producers and the producer of sustainable fuel a break. I say yes, and it is a question to the oil, to these manufacturers, to make the oil available for us, or the fuel available to us.
Abdul Hamid.
Well, I will also answer yes, depending on the conditions.
Do you believe it?
Yes, I do, because we have no choice. I mean, let's face it. Now, if you ask me, will there be anything new in the industry that will take us there? The only answer is SAF today. There's nothing else that will take us there.
The airlines are willing to play ball if the rest of the world plays ball. If they produce the SAF, if the governments provide incentives, as Willie and Abdul Wahab said, incentives to produce this sustainable fuel, then we will do it. We will buy the fuel, even though it's more expensive. But you have to...
What's the current premium?
I don't know.
3 times.
Yeah. And it's not available, and you're taxed and you're penalized because you don't take it. I mean, it's a crazy situation at the moment. The airlines are willing and able. Give them the tools.
So my view is, as we all know, the physics of powered flight make this challenge extremely difficult, and the pathways that are available to us at the moment show us that there is no silver bullet. Having said that, it is an inescapable reality that as an industry we have to get there. So my answer, given your range of possibles, Richard, would be yes, because of the spirit of humankind and the need to achieve it, but it will come with a cost, and the challenge around the cost will be almost as big an issue as the challenge around and enabling the solution.
So is that a yes or yes at a terrible cost?
It's yes with a cost. Terrible.
Right, all right. Now let's have your... Do you want to change your vote?
No, I would agree.
You're all at yes or yes with a terrible cost?
Yes, with the cost.
Yes with a cost. Yes with a cost?
Yes, with slight cost.
All right, so you're coalescing at yes with a terrible... I'll take the word terrible. Well, no, we'll leave it in. All right, vote, please. Go on, vote. Let's see. Let's see how the room thinks. Microphone here. Right. Takes about 15 seconds for the whole thing to go through. While we're waiting for the result, do we have a result yet? No? Some of you are slow voting. It's not difficult. You run airlines. Sorry? It's that technique. I mean, good God, if you can't find the bloody team that should be in it. 70 of you, you're voting. All right, while we're looking at the results on this, is not the issue also, and I think that in your report, Secretary General, oh, there we go, we do have a result. Willie, you can't have, I won't be here, I'm sorry. No, yes, at a terrible cost. But what I think is interesting is the honesty of the 32%, 32.4% who say no.
You see, we just signed a deal with Shell in Dubai to make SAF available at Dubai airport. Now we're 24, reaching 24. So why can't other airport and other government work with the producer to make it available? Yes, it can be made available. The technology we know is
But
there.
not in enough capacity.
That is the challenge with the manufacturers to make it available. So we need to drive them because we have no choice other than to use this sustainable fuel to support our operation.
Do you prefer carrot or stick to the producers?
I think that's fine, but I mean, it is the producer will be able to overcome the cost of it, and they'll be able to sell the fuel at a reasonable price. And I think it is a liability and a responsibility we have, and we owe it to the society.
Yes, I mean, we all have plans.
I think that we're getting all the microphones on. Just point the microphone to your mouth. Just that might be better. Try that.
If it works, yes. We all have plans to either secure delivery of SAF or produce SAF in each and every country in a way that it will secure our needs. That's why the answer, of course, cannot be something else than yes, but it's going to be at high cost. Now, there's a cynical part in this current situation, which is we are being asked, especially by some countries in the UAE, to have enough SAF to cope with their legislation when there's no way for us to buy SAF in these countries. And this is completely cynical because you get to pay extra taxes on that should be invested in the research and in producing SAF, where it goes in the pocket of the state. It has to change in a way, and Abdul Wahab said it this morning in his introduction presentation.
As I look at and there's a very good diagram in the annual report which shows the multiplicity of schemes. Corsia, the EU, the ETS scheme. Frankly, I don't understand them, and I suspect some of you don't either, but employ people who do. How complex is it for you, Samir, to actually manage that aspect, recognizing the precursor being you've got to do it?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen today CETA have a solution to be able to manage, obviously, the sustainability issue across an airline and give the right information to the customers. And airlines will be employing all these kind of solutions to be able to manage this particular process. Look, 30% believe that it's not going to happen. We as airline CEOs have to be optimistic. I think the no is from mainly the airplane manufacturers and the engine manufacturers who may think it's not possible represented here. But we are optimistic, even though we're going to have to pay for it.
Bring up the question number 2, because it's related. What I need to get to the bottom of is what you think is, there's no silver bullet, but what's the next best thing? What's the lasso that's going to? Now, the choices are fix the infrastructure. I assume that also means provide incentives for a step change in technology, incentivize the use of SAF, or I'm not going to allow you to have D, which is all of the above. What I'm trying to get to is, if there's not a single answer, what's the best solution? What is the one thing? Is it the complexity of the schemes? Is it the mandates? What's the one thing, start with you, Abdullah, that really pisses you off about the whole thing?
Well, let's talk about the solution. For me, short-term solution is answer number C, which is SAF. Incentivize SAF in order to make it available and easy to buy. And the long term would be the answer B, because we need a break and a kind of revolution in the industry. We have been using the same planes for 70 years, so we need something new. Short term would be C, long term would be B.
And the incentive to use has to come from where? Government?
Governments and...
To producers or governments to airlines?
It's the same. If it's to producers, prices will be lower. If it's to the airlines, costs will be lower. So it's the same, in my opinion.
I think we need to help the producers, and the government need to invest in to the producers to allow them to overcome the setting up cost. That is what's holding them back. And I think we need government to come and invest in that rather than asking airlines to pay taxation into this carbon emission offset.
For an airline like yours, which global, I'm sure you can remind me how many countries you fly to, but everyone has a different scheme, or at least groupings of schemes. How difficult is it to manage that?
It is very complicated, and different regions is coming up with some mandates and some threshold, penalizing the airlines to pay taxation or to pay a fee for not able to carry out or lift fuel from that country, even though the fuel is not available on the airport. They're telling you, you have to pay the penalty. There is no sense at all, there is no logic at all to what they're doing.
Should take some confidence perhaps from recent history. So I can remember the IATA AGM in 2018, which was in Sydney, and to the best of my knowledge, net zero and carbon reduction wasn't even on the agenda, certainly wasn't mainstream. Very short period of time later, I think it was 21 when we were all in Boston, IATA and all of its members signed up to net zero by 2050. So relatively recent short-term history. And I think we should take some confidence from that, because now it's front and center in everything we discuss and everything we challenge collectively. The but is as follows. We all know it's not as simple as any of the things up on that decision chart, sadly, but we all know that's the case, because it will require all of the above. It will require things that at the moment aren't developed, and will still need a double six. It'll be governments, regulators, policy setters, airlines, aircraft manufacturers, aero engine manufacturers, infrastructure owners, fuel companies, and science and technology developers, and we'll still need a double six. But the confidence should come from that piece of relatively short history is what can we achieve if we stay on this, because it is an immovable requirement of modern aviation in the next 5 to 7 years going forward.
How does the industry always manage to end up being the whipping boy? How does the industry, despite the best efforts of Willie and Abdul and everybody lobby, it's as if you, except maybe arguably with certain exceptions, but it's as if you don't carry political weight, particularly in Europe. The airlines go to the governments and no one seems to listen. There's no votes in airlines. Tony, then you, Samir.
Yeah, look, it's a relatable target for the masses. You know, it's something that we all know is essential to modern economies. There is a huge demand for travel, and that's only ever going to increase. But it's something that's relatable as a contributor to emissions. Nowhere near on the scale of global shipping, but of course that's not as relatable to the mainstream public. So I think, look, there's no point in us being victims of the way in which media, you know, and some lobbyist groups target on aviation, because quite frankly, let's call it as it is. We've got a problem, we've got a challenge, and for us to sustain ourselves as the industry that we're all so proud of, we have to crack this problem. It's as simple as that, Richard.
Difficult question. I mean, why the industry is the target? I think it's because it's a throwback from the time when travel was a luxury, air travel. People still think that luxury travel, even though for the last 20 years it's been for the masses, you know, ever since deregulation and the advent of low-cost carriers and everybody else. moving in line. But still people have this mindset that this is luxury and people who have money that can travel must pay for this element, even though obviously emissions, global emissions from the aviation industry account for a few percent either way. I think we need to go back to that this is a global problem, and the issue is to have local schemes doesn't work. Pollution is a global problem. Main polluters are China and the US, not even Europe. And still, the approach is very segmented, very regional. Every country wants to do its own thing. And this is the biggest complication. We need a global system that is fair, across the board, and easily applied, and things that will actually improve the image of the aviation industry.
But none of you on this panel, well, deny it if you will, you don't need to agree. None of you believe that that's going to happen in a short order. A global agreement with everybody hand in hand marching towards, you can't even get the agreement on credits of SAF from one jurisdiction to the next and the flights.
Well, it's a really complicated subject. Get the agreement of everybody on this subject is tough. We were talking about infrastructure. It's been decades now that we've been talking about having a single European sky. We're talking about 20 countries, 28 countries, 27, and they just don't get along. So I don't see the whole world getting together around this subject.
Right, so in that environment, or in that scenario, where it becomes, you all basically have to muddle on through, doing the best you can with your own individual airline, following the rules in the individual cases, and just managing, as Alex Stubb, former Prime Minister of Finland, always used to say, managing the suboptimal outcome.
As is the case with many other things.
Let's have your vote on this. Have any of you voted on this? What do you want most from governments to join? Let's have a look at the results. Go on, vote everybody.
They didn't listen to you.
That was the cop-out answer. But it's true in a sense, that is the answer. As we move forward, let's talk competition. All right, the competitive landscape that you face at the moment is very difficult. And the alliances are up to a point, the JVs are up to a point, but it's still competition between you all, particularly if you have more open skies and if you were to get seventh and eighth freedom rights within the region. So, Emirates, how are you handling competition and competition threats? And are you worried when he comes along?
No, I think when he comes around, it's going to increase businesses around for all of us. So it's good what's happening in Riyadh, as we're all going to gain out of it.
Sorry?
I think, no, what's happening in Riyadh is quite going to be pleasant for all the regions, and the region's going to gain out of it. Whereas it's going to stimulate growth, it's going to stimulate more businesses around all of us. But the competition is a fact, is there, and we need to deal with the competition through the product. Whoever is offered the right product, he will be the winner. And today the loser is the one who's losing on the product, not the pricing.
And this requirement of greater investment and this requirement of product, does that give the larger carriers, and that's particularly relevant at ACO, does that give you a greater advantage?
See, I give you a real example, an experience that we have gone through the pandemic. Most of the companies during the pandemic have gone toward reducing their cost because they were bleeding. We were bleeding, and we did not go after a product. In fact, we went into investing in our product, enhancing our product on the air and on the ground, the return we got from our customers today, and that's why today we are leading the world with our product. And we are gaining from that by having and enjoying today's seat factors.
Royal Air strategy.
Most of them are narrow body and wide bodies, but 200 planes is a big fleet. We will not do this if we are not confident about the market and how it will evolve. Who is the biggest competitor to Royal Maroc today on the continent? It's not even an African carrier, it's Air France. So we need to find a way to bring good business to everybody, to bring good connections. There's no way on the continent that you can fly from a point A to a point B or travel from a point A to a point B without flying. That's where the market is, and we're going to be investing in it.
As you invest in your Dream Africa strategy, how far is it point to point and how far is it transfer traffic?
Well, I believe it's going to be 1/3 point to point. Morocco is the #1 African destination in terms of tourism, and it has to stay this way. So we aim to reach 30 million tourists in the next 10 years. 1/3 will be point to point, and 2/3 will be transit.
Transit, but you have a potential for great transit through Africa.
Yes, of course. We are actually the biggest African connector, connecting Africa to Europe and Africa to the US. I'm not talking about Asia, but to Europe and to the US. Of course, the potential is there, and we need to be transparent about this. Our DNA has started on the continent since 1958, so there's no way we cannot be a strong player in the region.
I'll come back to you in a second, but related again, your strategy, I was reading your aircraft purchases that you're doing. I would say, and I'm not surprised for an engineer and a man like yourself, but it's measured.
Yes.
No, I tell you the word, prudent.
Well, we have to be prudent. I mean, in this business, you have to be prudent because of the risks, as you can see. So we have to be prudent. We have to make investment policies that are flexible. And obviously, our biggest problem is our relationship with the manufacturers, because we need flexible delivery dates and flexible movement, and yet manufacturers of airplanes and parts and so on are very inflexible in terms of deliveries, and all deliveries are being delayed at the moment. I mean, we have particular issues with certain suppliers in this area. But I think in general, in terms of competition, the idea is that we must ensure, I mean, competition is a good in principle. You know, you have a single country, a single carrier operating to a country, that stifles competition. Once you have competition, it opens up. But the competition must be fair. And I'm not talking about supported carriers versus unsupported carriers. I'm talking about things like fuel prices. In our part of the world, fuel prices are heavily regulated by governments and are used differentially. Our cheapest fuel at the moment is North America and Europe. And our most expensive fuel is actually in this part of the world.
Which raises my earlier point about the industry doing a less than stellar job when it comes to putting the political pressure necessary.
Yes, that's one element. We also have another issue related to low-cost carriers. Governments are now thinking that low-cost carriers are the only enablers of tourism, and therefore they're supporting low-cost carriers to come to our part of the world, financially supporting them, versus their own incumbent carriers. So it's a government policy is quite unique in this thing in terms
You're
of.
all owned, well, not all. Well, no, yes, all. You're all owned by government.
There's no connection.
Well, hang on. You're all owned by government, and it seems to me, with the exception of you, because you're not flying yet, it's only your government that actually has said, look, this is really important. If you need a new runway, we'll build it. If you need a new terminal, we'll build it. If you need that, we'll get it done.
They don't build it for us, they build it for the city.
Oh, that's the same thing.
No, come on. Because if you have the right infrastructures, you will invite others to come. If you are limited in your infrastructure, you're throwing business away. So what are you going to do? Logic telling you, go and invest in your infrastructures and have an open sky policy to attract everybody into your cities. You generate in business and everybody become a winner. Then
Right.
you are controlling.
But, Tony, the chairman Actually, I'll take one from your thoughts on this. The chairman of Turkish Air said to me a few weeks ago, he said, fine, I'm happy for everybody to arrive and fly. Come into Turkey. Bring people to Turkey. This is what, or Turkey Air as he would put it, this is what we want. So long as you're not just coming in to take my citizens away. So long as you're not just,
It's his choice. It's the citizen's choice. It's his choice which product he will go through. He will choose in price, he will choose in product, he will choose in network, and that is the choice of the passenger. Why you want to remove that choice from your citizens? Allow them multiple options and for them to make that decision. So if my product better than yours, I will get the business from you.
Can you cope in that scenario?
Yes, I'm gonna cite something that one time I told you I was coming from FMCG, and you said FMCG is a.
Sorry?
At one point of time, a few years ago, I told you I came from FMCG business.
You do. You're
you
a true
told me,
marketeer.
yeah, and you told me FMCG is something completely different. Agree, but there's one point in common. It's the market who decides. It's the customer. There are two types of industry, airline industry. Those where the state and the country wants to invest to.
Of not making the mistakes of the past. What's the single biggest mistake that you need to avoid?
Actually, that's a great question, and it wasn't one I was anticipating from you, because I'm still reeling, because I'm such a sensitive soul. When you mentioned the word competition before, you looked at me with those devious eyes, as if you were trying to create an enfant terrible at this end of the panel. And if I can come back to that one just for a moment, because we're the inverse of a super heavyweight like Emirates or a heavyweight like Qatar Airways, i.e. this is 93% point-to-point in Riyadh today, whereby demand far outstrips supply. So from a competition point of view, let's face it, this industry has always been super competitive and always will be, and that's a good thing. But we're, as Riyadh Air, your enfant terrible, we're not here to become another global connector.
Well, you say that.
And I do say that, Richard,
you say that
because it's evidence-based, sir.
Except in the slide shown by Gakko a moment ago, you're aiming to be number 5 global passenger connecting hub.
That's correct, but you'll also remember what was the percentage of transfer traffic that was mentioned on the same slide, which is the inverse of Dubai and it's the inverse of Doha. So I think the point is, we're talking, as you rightly said, if you go back to your Turkish example, this is about allowing a successful economy to continue to grow on the trajectory that it's on. I don't think any of us are aware of a successful economy that hasn't got global connectivity, and the competition that goes with it is an ever-present. But for the avoidance of doubt, particularly within the media spectrum,
we're not here, sir,
to create artificial competition that doesn't exist when it's heavily demand-driven. In terms of the single thing, we try and make sure that we don't do wrong. I think it's almost an impossible question because, we've all got a PhD in how not to do it. I think I've got one as well. But the gift we have got, of course, is no legacy and a blank sheet of paper. And a big theme of this particular AGM, some of the great work that's been done by IATA and with ACO and the CETA sign-in here today, is the fact that timing is all important in life in general.
Right.
We are on the cusp of being able to move into a proper digitally enabled aviation experience, and that's something that we will start with from day one, where our brand will be a true digital native, because that's what this population demands. But I think all of us as an industry now have that within our grasp.
And we've seen the prospect of that with that excellent video from CETA. One of the interesting, to prove that I do sometimes read, I looked at the annual report and the documents from if you look at the chart of your costs, some of you are the region versus the rest of the world. Fuel is a bit higher, or actually it's about 10% higher. All the other costs are fairly on par, except general and administrative expenses, which averages in the rest of the world 7%, and in the region is 15%, twice that. What are you spending it on? Why are costs higher for general and administrative expenses? Are you bloated?
What do you mean by general expenses? What's the definition?
What is in general and administrative expenses?
It's it's everything which is not operating expenses.
In other
Now,
words,
that includes as sales and so on and so forth.
no, sales is under marketing. I think it's just basically costs of running the airline, but not the flights.
For us, it's much less than the 15%. We're around 7 to 8%.
So you're at the industry average?
I believe so.
No, Samir, where are you? Are you got too many people?
No. I mean, the people expense is under the people expense. Actually, in Royal Jordanian, our people expense, our salaries represent about 12% of our cost structure, and the total employee cost is about 18%. It's not a major cost driver in our airline. As I said before, our biggest cost driver is currently fuel. 42% of the entire cost of the airline is fuel. And last year, it was 52%. When the price went up to $140 a barrel. So, but regarding this general administrative expenses, I mean, every country classifies its general overheads and general expenses in different categories. So I'm not sure that you can draw a valid comparison there.
I guess the philosophical point that I'm making is, has the industry in this region
Efficient.
cut back from sort of jobs that don't really exist to overcapacity of people to make the industry here commercially realistic?
Agreed. And yeah, that's a drive every airline CEO, irrespective of where he is, driving all the time to reduce his costs. The owners and the general public don't allow you to do anything different.
Anything you want to add?
I think those airlines who's not making great money, they should start by examining this 15% completely. It sound too high.
So, well, those airlines that are not making good money, should they go out of business?
Not definitely go out of them. They should improve their expenditures. They need to become more efficient. And I think there are ways, and we have seen that. I think the pandemic have taught us many lessons, and one of the lessons is that to go and look at your costs and your infrastructure. And we have learned, Emirates also, we've learned, and we have managed to reduce our costs. Is there more margin? Yes, there is more margin to do, and there's more work to be done. But the pandemic was the greatest lesson that forced all of us to go and examine some of the things in more details.
Tony, as you start, thank you, as you start, Riyadh, with a decent sort of budget, how do you avoid bloating it? You want to be in the air in 25, and we know that you can be in the air if you what's that old phrase, throw some money at it. How do you avoid your cost base becoming bloated?
So I think a number of us in the room have been involved in sizable transformation programs which have been a function of costs getting ahead of a sustainable profile, and I certainly don't want to recreate a situation like that. I think the answer to the question is, and this might come across overly simplistic, but I think there is a fair degree of experience behind this that we would all concur with, is as follows. Look at CASK and backflush it. So from the cost for every kilometre, as a ratio, what you can afford to spend from CASK onto each and every element of the cost breakdown structure. And in other words, design what you've got as a cost input around an output rather than ending up realising later on that you've created something that you can never recover from a RASK point of view against that cost structure. So again, it sounds Billy Basic, but guess what? There's no substitute for Billy Basics in our line of business.
As we come to the end, I sort of wonder, do you, I don't think you want his job, Tony's job, but do you sort of look at and slightly envy the fact he has a blank sheet of paper and can build from the bottom up? No legacy issues, no agreements that he has to worry about. You know, he has more mastery over his own destiny.
Well, of course, starting from scratch, an airline is a very, very good thing, and it makes things maybe easier in the beginning. Still, having to transform an airline, in my opinion, is as enthusiastic as starting from the beginning. And in 2020, that's what we did. When all the planes were down and we couldn't keep our fleet flying because our country was closed for nearly 1 year, we had to transform completely the airline. So all those protocols that we used to have and work with, especially with the unions, we had to break them and start from scratch. Digitalization, we moved from 6% of our revenues coming from digital to 30% today. You were talking about efficiency.
How do you keep that momentum going?
There's an enthusiasm in the organization, and the new strategy is bringing everybody together, and we will keep on going in this direction.
At Emirates, how do you, as we come to the end, how do you keep the newcomer, I mean, you're now a very large, mature airline that, dare I say, has legacy potential. How do you keep fresh? I don't just mean product fresh. I mean conceptually, mentally, managerially, that you're going to have a new whippersnapper snapping at your heels soon.
Yeah, I think we've been in this business now for more than 36 years. The airline has been there. It developed a very good and strong brand. We have got Dubai there, which is another strong brand. And we are keeping our workforce well protected, because that's what keep the airline going on. And that's what have helped us in the past. That's what is going to help us going forward.
I want to show you the last question. Can we have the last question? Question number 5, which is where we will end today's festivities, or at least this panel. And basically, it is a version of Emirates, Qatar, Al Adju all are already global connectors. Soon Riyadh joins. What do you think the reaction of airlines is? Great, bring on the flight. Oh dear. Or help. Samir, start from you.
Didn't see that coming. Look, no, I mean, it's just more competition. And as I said, competition is healthy. I mean, we deal with new startups every day, and we just have to deal with another element of competition. And we wish them the best of luck.
I think it's great, and I support that, but it's given birth to me at the wrong time. He's going to be faced with practical realities, supply chain problem, availability of aircraft, and resources. These are the challenges that are going to be faced, and these are true challenges that Tony is going to have to deal with.
That was almost said rubbing hands. Finally, let's have a look at how. Do you want to answer that? If you were back at your old job, by the way, why didn't you merge the two? No, sorry, that was a question for another day in another forum. Why? What would your answer be?
So I think you've done it again. You've tried to create the enfant terrible with even the question now. So that's 2 now, 3 strikes, and we all know where that goes. But I think the point, Richard, is it's very easy for a kind of, again, a debate to spark this up as that kind of frame question. I think a more informed answer is, given the way demand is growing in this part in the world, in particular, the fact that competition's a good thing, which we all acknowledge in any event, our brothers at Saudia and ourselves are primarily here to serve our nation, to be able to get better connectivity to the kingdom. It's heavily point-to-point driven, and therefore I think the educated unpacking of this suggests that this is not something for anybody to be unnecessarily worried about. We'll probably do it in a spirit of partnership with a number of big international collaborations in any event, because otherwise we won't be able to move at the pace that you saw in that aviation vision. So I can see what's up on the slide already. Now doing your job. Great, Richard. It's great.
Bring on the fight. Gentlemen, I'm very grateful to you. Thank you. Whatever happens in the next 12 months before we all meet again, or at IATA or whatever, I mean, the one thing we've learned is that this industry doesn't change. The only thing that doesn't change is the fact that it changes. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you for the panel participants and the speakers. I'll switch to Arabic. وبما أن الجمعية العامة المقبلة إن شاء الله ستعقد في المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية بدعوة كريمة من أخونا المهندس سامر المجالي نائب رئيس مجلس الإدارة والرئيس